Your phone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's with start from the art.
As it should be.
Yeah, they're very good at finding. Welcome, everybody, back to the House Senate Conference on S.127, the Omnibus Housing Bill, and it is 4:25 in the afternoon on the 29th? 29th. Okay, we are coming back, okay, and then we just have to make up our mind where we are. Go ahead.
So thank you for your offer. We have a counter. We're not willing to go where you are, but there are three things that we were looking at. I mean, we can bring up the language. Can we do that?
Yes, sir.
And highlight where our changes are. Thank you, Cameron.
Yes.
So
Just scroll to the first one.
yeah, our first change to counter to you is after we get seasick.
Apologies.
So the but-for test, you would ask to include moderate income.
Yeah.
So we still want to limit it to affordable, and the reason why is that the percentage requirement does then open up the total value of projects. So we still think affordable has that more meaningful exemption for the but-for test, but moderate doesn't. So that's our counter to you on that. And then let's move on to the next one.
Keep going.
We still have the 40 million in with the revisit. So we appreciate your offer of removing the or accepting the sunset on the TIF. We propose to remove the sunset on the TIF, but we still want the cap of $40 million plus the 5 million
So
and then
we're
the
removing
reset.
the TIF sunset, so it's just not sunsetting, but we're staying with the cap.
And then the
No
last,
sunset on either of them or just TIF?
TIF.
just TIF, right? So we still want the ability to review and yeah,
So no TIF sunset.
no TIF sunset, right?
TIF
right.
sunset.
So we got your proposal for 75, 85. We'd still like to go with 70, 85. So to create that 15% difference, current TIF programs are at 70. So we still wanted to stick within that. Provide that meaningful increase that you had looked at before at 85%. And then there's one more, I believe.
This is for you, Justin.
Yes, so point well taken that Bepsi saying we don't have enough time with a 5-year look back to adjust the increment. Different from a normal TIF is that this is a shorter, project should be shorter. They shouldn't have so many different instances of debt. Should be easier to manage. So we're saying
You're saying
not 10 years.
should.
Should.
How do you know that?
The whole design of the program is such that it was supposed to be simpler to administer.
It was, but what do you see in this that's simpler?
Wait,
It's the same
let's get this out. Okay, go ahead.
So in terms of different phase filings, we're not anticipating that. And with this particular program,
Because you took that out.
no, phase filings was never part of it.
I don't. Multiple parcels was good to be considered, but. took that out.
Contiguous parcels, that's different, but phase filings is much different in TIF from that. Yep. So this is really looking at the 8 years. We had 5, you had 10. We said, we'd like to go with 8 in order
There
to
was
look
a
at that.
rationale.
And what's the rationale? I guess that's my
It-
question. is What's the rationale for 8?
Yeah, just a minute. Yeah, go ahead.
Sign this bill.
What's the rationale for 8?
There are two things. One is that we have the debt incursion period that is originally 5, but could be extended for 3. So the total of that is 8 years.
I would like to hear from Betsy. I'm not hearing any expertise coming from what you're saying. I'm just hearing you just feel
Well,
like,
let him finish. Go on.
okay.
I did not receive the testimony that you had, Mr. Chair.
We received testimony from Betsy that 8 years would work.
That's.
I pull it up.
I would say 8. Why don't we have Jessica speak after?
I don't
Charlie
think it's a
finishes?
good idea to
Okay.
disagree with the.
Do that. So our counter is 8 years. We recognize 5 is too short. And then that's our proposal.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay, so your but-for is still only affordable.
Yeah.
Cap still at 40 million.
Right.
Plus the 5 million additional. You're willing to let the sunset be removed.
Yep. And TIF.
And
Okay.
your increment percents are 70, 85.
Yep.
and you want to go to 8 years for debt, instead of 10.
Right. For adjusting that.
Right. Mr. Chair, could we hear from Betsy? I think we'd appreciate, hearing from Betsy.
Of course.
So thank you for the record, Jessica Hartleben, Vermont Economic Progress Council. My understanding is that when this bill was created as Spark, we were trying to keep things consistent with the TIF statute. I sent the conferees during the break the language that is in the current TIF statute that says that during the 10th year following the creation of the tax increment financing district, the municipality would submit an updated tax increment financing plan to the council, which would include adjustments and updates of appropriate data and information sufficient for the council to determine, based on tax increment financing debt actually incurred and the history of increment generated during the first 10 years, whether the percentages approved under subsection F of this section should be continued or adjusted to lower percentages to be retained for the remaining duration of the retention period to provide sufficient municipal and educational increment to the service of the remaining debt. So what I'm hearing from Rep. Branning and Chair Marcotte is that maybe I said 8 years, but I'm not sure that I did. And if I did, it may have been when the percentages of time for increment retention were being adjusted. And because we are now in a place where we are going to incur debt for 5 years with the potential of 3 years, and the sort of basis for increment retention is 20 years, which is consistent with the TIF statute. Based on the history of the TIF program, it makes sense that we would look at this in year 10 so that we have an understanding of how much increment has been generated by these projects. In addition, these are projects that are going to be smaller in nature and may not generate enough increment. So extending it out to 10 years gives the municipalities and the private developers a longer period of time before they have to come back to VEPC to see if we're going to need to downward the increment retention. We're not going to be able to ever go up. We're only going to be able to go down. So giving the municipality and the private developers as long of a runway as we possibly can so that VEPC can then evaluate whether we should be decreasing.
We needed, sorry, for a roll call.
Okay.